Ancient legends tell of abandoned children reared in the wild by wolves, apes, or other beasts. However, the most famous wild child of all is the wild boy of Aveyron. In the year 1800, the people of La Bassine, France, caught glimpses of a naked boy living wild in the forest. He looked about 10 years old, but nobody knew anything about his past. Where had he come from? Had he been abandoned? How had he managed to survive? Sometimes he would come close to the village to steal potatoes from the fields. He seemed as unaffected by the cold of winter as by the heat of summer. Captured, he was placed in the care of the National Institute for the Deaf and Dumb in Paris. For much of the time, the wild boy seemed totally apathetic, but occasionally there were strange outbursts of emotion. If the sun suddenly came out, he gave every impression of wanting to escape through the window. Parisians had expected him to be the epitome of their concept of the noble savage, much like our modern-day Tarzan. The reality was disillusioning. The authorities quickly classified him as a congenital idiot, and the public lost interest. There was one consultant at the Institute, Jean Itard, who believed that possibly the boy's apparent idiocy was only due to his lack of contact with other human beings. The methods which Dr. Itard was to develop over the next 6 years represented some of the world's earliest experiments in clinical psychology. To start with, Dr. Itard simply studied the boy's behavior and recorded his observations. The boy seemed unable to relate in any way to other human beings and tended to totally ignore their presence. All his moments of pleasure derived from an enjoyment of nature. Unlike people in society, vision was not his most important sense. He possessed an awareness of smells which would pass undetected by others. He appeared to make no distinction between pleasant smells and foul ones. Putting snuff up his nose produced no effect whatsoever. He was unable to recognize his own reflection. Nor could he differentiate between a picture and the real object. He appeared to be completely impervious to temperatures. He would put his hand in boiling water to grasp a potato without apparently feeling the scalding heat. He gave the impression of deafness. An unexpected loud noise produced no effect. But Itard found the slight sound of a walnut being cracked caused an instant reaction. So he concluded that the boy could hear perfectly, but his reactions were selective. Long months of patient care went by, and slowly, a change began to take place. The boy became cleaner and tidier, learning to dress himself. For the first time in his life, he learned to play, and although he could not speak, he now had a motive for wanting to make himself understood. At this late stage in his life, he was beginning the childhood which the severity of his existence in the wild had denied him. He was discovering his imagination. how much further could he progress? At the Institute for the Deaf and Dumb, Dr. Itard and his wild child pupil forged ahead. The doctor's work and the child's learning progressed more quickly now. They had the additional influence of the boy's governess, Madame Guérin.
Est-ce que Monsieur Petit viendra le voir cet après-midi?
Ah, je crois pas, Madame Guérin.
Through his actions, the boy gained the ability to express himself with increasing clarity, but speech eluded him.
Il me regarde. Oh!
Dr. Itard noticed that one sound, O, always attracted the boy's attention. So Dr. Itard gave him a name which included this sound.
Victor? Voilà, il a un nom.
From now on, he was called Victor. Anxious for Victor to speak, the doctor decided to concentrate on eau, the French word for water. Perhaps Victor could say eau as easily as he recognized the sound.
Oh! Oh! Oh!
Oh.
Oh! Oh! Oh!
Oh.
Oh! 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 Oh!
Oh.
Oh! 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 Oh!
Undeterred, Itard continued his experiment with another sound, and eventually Victor spoke his first word, the French word for milk.
Bravo! Voilà! Bien fait!
Next, Itard set about teaching Victor to recognize symbols, first by matching objects to drawings, and then shapes to shapes. The doctor's goal? To develop Victor's memory of a sequence of shapes, which in time would be replaced with letters. The letters then formed into words. To Victor, these exercises seemed pointless and boring. He could not appreciate the goals Dr. Itard had set, and now the learning had ceased to be fun. As the tasks became more complex, he became increasingly difficult and frustrated. Had Itard's revolutionary experiments reached their limit? Did Victor's learning abilities have boundaries the doctor could not trespass? Itard persisted, and slowly, Victor began to recognize words. The doctor would give him a piece of paper with the name of an article, and the boy would fetch it from the next room. Dr. Itard then took the experiment one stage further. He locked the door to the room. What would Victor do when asked to find an item? Although similar objects were in the room with them, Victor ignored them. Itard suddenly realized that knife, box, and book meant only those particular items they habitually used in their experiments. So Itard had to explain that a book was any book.
Voilà. Livre. Livre. Donnez-moi les mains. Voilà.
Gradually, Victor's vocabulary increased to include the use of adjectives.
Grand livre. Petit livre. Grand livre.
And finally, the ultimate achievement, writing. Victor never learned to speak more than a few words, but he could write his needs. After 6 years of study with Dr. Itard, he moved out of the Institute to live a long and reasonably normal life in the care of his governess. Dr. Itard had kept his journals faithfully throughout his association with Victor. Their publication revolutionized educational treatment of the mentally handicapped. As for the wild boy of Aveyron, certainly he could no longer be classed as an idiot or a savage. Perhaps the closest modern counterpart to wild children is a California girl, Jeannie, who was discovered in 1970. Her story is recreated here for In Search Of. She had been kept in a small room, tied to a potty chair, from the age of 20 months until she was nearly 14 years old. Her parents were charged with child abuse. Her father later committed suicide. Her mother was sentenced to prison. Since her release, Jeannie has begun learning basic skills, but progress is slow. Apparently, there is a time in our lives for learning such skills. If that period is missed, the full mastery of those skills may be lost forever.